What's up guys, Rafael Reich here, and today we're gonna talk about the tech cards and the hand traps for the upcoming events. We still have plenty of events like the ICS in Indianapolis, and we still have national season. For example, the national one in Brazil still didn't happen. So we're gonna talk about the tech cards and how should you approach your deck building for each event. For example, we're still gonna have some kind of Tempai sized events because some of the nationals aren't like that big, so you're gonna face more Tempais. For the big events like I said in Indianapolis, you probably need to get a more aggressive approach into the Snake Eyes strategy, and that's all what we are going to discuss. So if you're already liking this content, I ask you to please give us a like and please subscribe because we are very near to get into 1K. So I would really appreciate it if you guys could subscribe here. So now let's talk about the tech cards for these upcoming events. The first thing we have to talk here is about the hand traps. We made here 5 categories like the main deck, the side deck, the it depends, the okay, and the bad cards. This should be easy, but we're gonna talk about them. So the first thing we have to start is, I think right now in this format we have 12 cards that should be in every main deck who is willing to play hand traps, and those are 3 copies of Infinity Impermanence, 3 copies of FX Veiler, 3 copies of Ash Blossom Joyous Spring, and 3 copies of Ghost Mourner and Moonlight Show. Those 4 cards, they are the best cards to play against the Snake Eyes strategy. They can interrupt your Snake Eye Ash and the extender they are trying to set up to make their plays. So that's why when you are going to see the deck list, they are most likely playing 3 copies of each of those 4. It's because they are very consistent on, if you draw 2 of them, or if your opponent opens a weak hand, these hand traps are the best to interrupt them playing. So that's why, in my opinion, you should play those 4. And then what we're gonna discuss is about all the other cards that might be decent to play right now, okay? Because those cards, they are solid. They should be played, doesn't matter how. So we're gonna talk now about the other options. For example, we can talk about Ghost Bell. I gotta say, I don't dislike Ghost Bell right now, but I have a theory about it, and this theory about the Ghost Bell also pairs up with the Psy-Frame cards. That's mostly like, why are you going to play Ghost Bell in your side deck when you can play the Psy-Frame cards? The mainly cards you can negate with the Ghost Bell, those strategies can also lose for a Delta or for a Psy-Frame Gamma in the right spot. For example, if you are going to use your Bell to interrupt a Voiceless Voice and a preparation of rights, for example, you can just use Delta. Oh, but he opened with Sapphire. Sapphire, you wanna Bell Sapphire. Okay, but he's gonna search, make his place to go into the continuous spell, and you just Delta the continuous spell. So you have plenty of options on why you should play the Psy-Frames instead of Ghost Bell. That's why I think they are very decent side deck cards. But Ghost Bell by itself also has his kind of merit, because the card by itself can stop a lot of the Voiceless Voice strategy. It's decent against the Snake Eye strategy because you can interrupt some of their plays, and it's also pretty much decent against the Tempai Dragon because you can interrupt the Synchro 7 to summon back, you can interrupt the Phaedra, you can also interrupt the Synchros from coming back from the graveyard. So that's a lot of options that you have just by using Ghost Bell, and it's a better card to put in when you are going first. For example, when you need to, for example, take out some hand traps because they are not very useful against Tempais, and then you can get your Ghost Bell to make your deck better into some matchups. So that's fair, that's very decent, that's a very good reason why you could play the Ghost Bell. But I don't think DD Crow is good right now. Like, yeah, okay, the card has some value against the Tempai strategy, and that's the only matchup where Crow has more value than, for example, a Bestial. Because in this kind of matchup, you wanna have your DD Crow to try to interrupt the targets of Hydra, the Synchros from coming back, very similar from what you can get from Bell. But I still don't think this is good enough. I think if that's why you are willing to play DD Crow, I think you could just play Bell, that should be better into the Tempai matchup, and more generic and better for other matchups. And then if you need, for example, just the removal, the Bestials might be a very good option for your side deck. I like the Bestials a lot. I think these cards are very, very good because, especially because they are hand traps, they are going to interrupt your opponent, and they're also going to get you more follow-up. Magna Hood is the best one for sure because it gets you way more pressure by Magna Hood plus Drusum on the board. And this is especially strong because you can use this pressure, for example, when your opponent's trying to use the Flamberge to make the IP to put the IP Masquerena into the spell trap zone on the regular Snake Eye matchup. The problem with the Bestials inside of Bell or Diddy Crow is that the card does nothing against the Tempai strategy. So that's a thing that you need to think about. Do you need this spot on your side deck? Needs to be against Tempai's Dragons or a more generic card better in more scenarios? That's what it's up to you to decide. Well, Dimensional Shifter is the start of the category It Depends. It's not like the card is bad, it's not like the card is good, you just need to find the room to play the card, because if you don't have the right deck to play the Dimensional Shifter, you can't play it. It's a very strong card, it's an amazing card, but it highly depends in your deck not taking it very hardly. And a lot of decks are right now trying to approach better fields into Dimensional Shifter. For example, the Tempai Dragon even uses Shifter on their side decks. The Snake Eyes is now using the Kashiro cards that gives you a bit more of resilience under Shifter. So might not be the best time to play a Shifter deck. That's what I think, at least. Now, the Handtrap that gains life, this card is bad. Like, yeah, do you guys remember in the start of the format where everyone was playing 3 of this card and a Grave Dragon? Because, oh my god, the mirror match is so skillful, we need to have a win condition on time. This simply isn't true. This doesn't happen if you just go for a hand trap war, so yeah. Draw and Lock Bird is very okay card right now. It's not like the card is bad, it's not like the card is amazing, because if you are going to play against a regular Snake Eyes, for example, the card could be the best card in the story of the game. If your opponent, for example, starts with a Bonfire to take a Snake Eye Ash, you go for Draw and Lock Bird and you interrupt him forever. But if he starts with Draw Phase Wanted or normal summon Snake Eye Ash, he still can manage to put in a very decent board that should be enough to beat your opponent. And Draw also has a problem that's not very good against Tempai Dragons. Yeah, okay, I get it. If you use the Draw Lock when you get your opponent uses Prosperity, and your opponent uses Field Spell to search, those scenarios, they are very decent. But in many of these scenarios, the card simply doesn't do enough, and this is also another card that makes your deck weaker into Shifter, so it's weird to play Draw right now. I think that's my main concern. Like, you need to make your deck to destroy Snake Eyes, because the Snake Eyes is the best deck in the format and the deck that the better players are gonna be using. Oh, that's why you need to be prepared for it. And if you are not prepared for the Snake Eyes matchup, I don't think you can also be thinking very much about Tempai Dragons. You see, you need to make your deck as good as possible for both matchups, but you can't sacrifice the Snake Eyes matchup to make your deck better against Tempai, for example. And I don't even think that Draw is this card that makes it very better against the Snake Eye matchup. It's just like decent. Well, Ghost Ogre is a very decent card right now to play in the main deck. I personally still don't think this card is very good against the Tempai strategy, because in many cases they will just put the field spell to protect and they're not gonna use the field spell effect to search. But still, when you are going to pair up the Ghost Ogre with all other cards we have in this main deck, I think the card can really perform well over all the scenarios, because this can be a negate for Apollousa. If your opponent uses Apollousa on you and you chain Ogre to destroy the Apollousa will not negate the first effect she was attempting to negate. So it's a card that performs well against Tempai. It's a card that has a lot of spots against the Snake Eye strategy. I think this is the kind of card that is a mid-term between all the meta decks on the format. And Nibiru is an amazing card, but is weak against Tempai. This is weird, because the Nibiru is like very distant from all the other generic good cards, because Nibiru is even the best card of the format or the worst card of the format, depends on what you're gonna play against. Against Tempai, for example, this card absolutely sucks, but against Snake Eye, this card is amazing, especially when you can pair up Nibiru with another hand trap. So this is one of the calls that you need to make before the event. if you are willing to, if you are expecting to play against a lot of Snake Eyes, I feel like Nibiru should be a very decent call to have at least 2 copies in your main deck, or maybe copies in your side deck, because it's a very strong card into this kind of matchup. Also depends on which deck are you playing, because if you are playing the Snake Eyes Kashira version, it might be weird to have the Nibiru because conflicts with the Kashira cards. We have to think about all this kind of situation. Now, the Phantasme, I think it depends. The thing with Phantasme is, all the hand traps, they are gonna be dead if you wait into your opponent to make a Link Summon. Because you wanna use your Impermanence or your Effect Veiler on the normal summon of Snake Eye Ash, on like their first action of the turn to interrupt your opponent. And if you let your opponent, for example, go for IP Masquerena and then you Phantasme, there aren't many good cards that you can draw at this point that's gonna help you. The Phantasme might be helpful if you are willing to play a board breaker approach and wanna have more consistency cards. Phantasme might work like this, but you also have to remember yourself. The use of Phantasme opens you so much to triple tactical talents, and this is a very big problem. In theory, you don't want it to be open for triple tactical talents, especially if you are playing for a board breaker approach. That's why I think it depends, but not the worst card, not the best card, just weird. Well, Deck Lockdown, right now, I think it's a okay card. I think when you didn't have the Tenpai strategy, I think the Deck Lockdown was the best card for the side deck. But now that we have the Tenpai strategy, I feel like this card fell off because it's not that good against Tenpais, and it fell off for the Skill Drain. I think Skill Drain right now is the card that depends, because if you are playing Snake Eyes, you should play Skill Drain. But if you are not playing Snake Eyes, I don't think you have room to play Skill Drain right now. But that's the problem, right? The Skill Drain is very good against Tenpai, and it's very good on the mirror. And the Skill Drain and Deck Lockdown, they basically do the same. They are this weird kind of floodgate that you just have to make it on board. So when you get able to out you're by yourself, by your Snake Eye Ash or your Snake Eye Oak effect, or even by a Jabal Star, then you're gonna strong push into your opponent. But right now, I feel like the Deck Lockdown kind of fall off because of the Tenpai strategy, so I wouldn't be playing it right now. The Anti-Spell, it's very decent. I feel like this is one of the best cards in your side deck, because all decks can play the Anti-Spell. It's good. I have nothing to complain about the Anti-Spell. And Rivalry of the Warlords, it kinda goes the same of Rivalry, goes a match, there can be only one. It highly depends on which deck are you playing and in which decks are you expecting to face off. For example, I feel like the There Can Be Only One is not that good against Snake Eyes, and the Rivalry is also weird, but then we'll think about it, the Goes a Match is also terrible. So it highly depends, but in some kind of decks, for example, in a Tenpai Dragon, I feel like the Rivalry is very strong, because you have your pressure by your own engine and your own hand traps, and plus you have the Rivalry to make your opponent unable to break your board and make yourself able to OTK him on this turn. So that's why I feel like the Rivalry, it's a very better card than There Can Be Only One and the Goes a Match, but it all depends if your deck can play it. So that's basically it. Dimensional Barrier is a very solid side deck card, because it doesn't depend on your deck to being able to out the card like this Skill Drain and the Deck Lockdown. The card is just generically good. It's very good against Branded, it's very good against Voiceless Voice, it's very good against the Tenpai Dragon. So if you are struggling to have a generic card in your side deck that basically ignores the Snake Eye strategy, I feel like the Dimensional Barrier might be the best card for your scenario. And I gotta say, Magic Deflector is a card that is going up on my expectations from the latter events, because this card is amazing against Tenpai Dragons. This card is very decent against the Snake Eyes strategy, but by itself, it doesn't interrupt anything. That's my main issue right now. Like, I feel like the card is good, I feel like the card could be useful right now, but it's still mid. I don't know, I think this lacks of testing if the card is gonna be good enough, but this is a card that you should consider, because maybe the Goo is up there on the side deck, okay? Now, Simwork Find is a card that I don't like. I think this card requires you a lot of setup to be played enough. Like, it's not like the card is bad, I just feel like everyone upside here is a better side deck option than the Simu. Like, Sometimes I think the players are just trying to cope and like, oh, I have the new insane tech card and no one's gonna believe it, no one is gonna understand. But at the end, I think this is just bad. I think this is just like, not bad, but like worse than anything else we have up here. So yeah, that's it. Crossout Designator is a card for me that like very, very, very high risk, high reward. And I think that it really depends. Like, it depends on your deck being able to play the tech cards of the format. For example, we're not going to play a mirror match of the Snake Eyes. I think the Crossout Designator has fully value at this time, because it can interrupt the Snake Eyes cards. You can use to negate the Snake Eye Ash, maybe, but can also be used to negate the Handtraps and make your combo go further. So that's why I feel like the crossout depends. It really depends if you are playing Snake Eyes or if you're not playing Snake Eyes. And even if you are playing Snake Eyes, I personally don't like the card, but I understand the reason why people are playing it. Called by the Grave is a very decent card. I feel like it doesn't have room for it on main deck, but inside deck this card feels amazing. It's very good against Temple Dragons, even if they go first or they go second, because you can just use the Called by the Grave in the hierarchic seal, and also you can use the Called by the Grave to negate the Handtraps without the cost of having to banish the Handtrap like you used on the Crossout Designator. This is a more aggressive card because this can also interrupt your opponent engine by itself. You have your full combo, you didn't use the Call by the Grave, you can just set it and use it as an extra interaction over any matchup. For example, you can use it against the Voiceless Voice, maybe. So that's why I feel right now that the the Call by the Grave is a great card. Twin Twister is the kind of okay card. Now we're gonna talk about like cards that can out spells and traps from your opponent board. I feel like the Twin Twister and the Harpist Feather Duster, they are pretty much okay right now. They are not bad, they are not amazing. I feel like they are just like not better than the Cosmic Cyclone and the Lightning Storm. I feel like Lightning Storm right now is amazing. I think this card is very, very good at like all the scenarios, because giving you the flexibility to being able to out your opponent's spells and traps or your opponent's monsters is amazing, and this also helps you a lot playing over boards, because you have the option to choose what you're willing to do. If you are willing to play into the spell traps, the monsters, and this is also very interesting because it can destroy many cards at the same time. The Cosmic Cyclone, by the other side, it's better against running stun strategies, for example, because makes one of one trades that is not gonna be negated by Hujin, the fusion level 2 from the running stun, but has the problem that's gonna only be able to lead with one of those Floodgates, one of those spell and traps that make the deck so good. So that's why you need to decide between the Lightning Storm and the Cosmic Cyclone. Are you willing to make a better deck into the regular Floodgates like Skill Drain on the Snake Eyes, for example? I feel like the Lightning Storm is better into regular decks like Snake Eyes, those kind of decks going second, and the Cosmic Cyclone is better against some kind of Floodgate based decks like the Horus Stun and the Running Stun. Well, Evening Match, I don't even think this card is bad, but I think the cost you have to play the Evening Match is so high. Like, okay, now out of the decks doesn't make any kind of negate, doesn't make Baron or Savage to negate a Evening Match, but you still have to lose your battle phase. Your opponents are still gonna have Handtraps in his hand, and he's gonna be able to keep his board, because he's gonna make SP Knight, he's gonna make follow up with the Flamberge, and then he's gonna use SP Knight to banish itself plus anything that's gonna come back on that phase. They're still gonna have interaction on the field, and you don't have your battle phase. So when you let your opponent has this much of follow up, you are probably not gonna win anymore. So the fact that you had to use your battle phase to make this makes your opponent gain so much advantage and keep cards on field and still have plenty of interactions, that just makes you weak, and you're probably gonna lose on the next turn because your opponent made so much follow-up, you are not gonna be able to play through it. So that's why I don't think Evening Match is a good card right now. And the same kind of goes for Pankratops. The Pankratops doesn't force anything right now, so I think you shouldn't be playing it. Nightcrawler No More is okay. I think the card is just mid. Like, many decks are now putting the interactions in different points, like the Snake Eyes strategy, for example. They have the field spell to summon Masquerade and Link, they have the Promethean Princess in Graveyard, so doesn't have a right spot to use Nightcrawler No More. That's why the people are not playing it, because the card just doesn't negate enough. So, and right now, It's better to don't let your opponent play. That's why you are playing plenty of hand traps instead of trying to make your opponent stop by just one strong spell. Triple Tactical Talents, I like this card a lot. I think this card is one of the best cards over outside decks because everyone is on a hand trap approach. So if everyone is going to play hand traps, I don't know why you shouldn't be also being the one to play the cards that punishes hand traps. And Talents also has the flexibility that can be used as a going second card if your opponent has a weak board or not playing a very strong deck, because you can take your opponent cards. For example, you're playing against Kashira. Talents is amazing because you can take your opponent monster and then use it to break your opponent's board. That's why I think this card is very, very good and should be played at 3-off between your main deck and your side deck. Well, Trust is the definition of okay card because it can add you a lot of good traps, spells, but I still don't think it's good enough to make into your side deck. Like, all the cards on the okay or up, they are not bad cards. If they are on your side deck, you are not terrible player, oh my god, you suck. No, I just feel like the cards on the side deck and the main deck, they are better than the card on the OK line. But the cards on the OK line, they are not terrible. I just don't think they are good enough to make into your side deck or your main deck maybe. Well, now Forbidden Droplet, I really like Forbidden Droplet. I think this card is amazing and this card should be a very decent side deck, especially if you are willing to play against Tempai Dragons. Because the card against Tempai Dragons, this card against Tempai Dragons, they just rocks. I think this card against Tempai Dragons, they just have very big problems to play against them. And this is also decent to play through hand traps when you're going second. If your opponent's trying to hand trap you, you can just use your droplet to avoid the hand trap and negate your opponent's monster on the field. Thing here right now, I think it's a very good card to be played in main deck. Everyone is playing, even the Snake Eyes is playing, the Tempai Dragon is playing. All the good decks that could play this big boss should be playing it. I like Fehir very much. Super Poly highly depends. Like, this card is highly dependent on what are you expecting to play against. It's not like this card is bad, I just don't think this card is good enough, you see. And for example, in a branded strategy, this card might be useful because you can also use your monsters as fusion material for your approach. But like, for a regular deck, I don't think you have the spots to play it and also to play the fusions in your extra deck. And at the end, we're gonna talk about your change of heart. Change of heart here like represents you everything from the take, like Snatch Steal, Mind Control, and I feel this is okay at the best because the problem here is you are not willing to make your opponent making some plays. Your approach here should be play 20 hand traps per side and don't let your opponent combo you. Then if you make this plus change of heart, then what's gonna happen is that this change of heart is gonna be like weirdly stuck into your hand. If you're trying to go for a board breaker approach, this might be decent. This card is gonna be amazing, the mind control is gonna be amazing, but from my perspective, I don't think it's correct to play this kind of approach right now. That's why I wouldn't play the board breakers approach right now, and that's why I think this is pretty much incorrect and you should just stick into the regular hand traps approach. Well, that's my point of view over all the tech cards and all the hand traps that are relevant right now. If you disagree about anything, use the comments to do so. If you think my opinion on something should be necessary, like, Rafael, you missed this card, use the comments down below. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Again, I ask you for your like, for your subscribe, and for any comment here. And that's it. See you next video. Goodbye.